Hey there, everyone. Welcome and thanks so much for joining us today. So in this webinar, we're going to be basically exploring a bunch of new content in Auralia and Musition and looking at ways in which you can essentially expand your curriculum offering. We're going to be highlighting some existing content in the programs that you perhaps have not explored before, but we'll also be having a bit of a sneak peek at some of the new content that's coming really soon in Auralia and Musition 7. So there'll be kind of four main areas we'll be looking at today. Looking at some diversity content, helping you to make your curriculum more inclusive. We'll be exploring some of the fundamental side of things. There's lots of great content there. Some of it is a little tucked away or perhaps hasn't been formally released within our, within our complete syllabus. Or other areas of the software. And then those final two items there are fantastic new features coming in version 7 really soon. So we'll be looking at kind of how they work and some of the content that is attached to them. If you're brand new to Auralia and Musition and just joining us to get a bit of a feel for the programs, that's fantastic. I will also just direct you to some of our other training videos, which may just give you a broader understanding of how the programs work and the sorts of things they may be able to offer your program. So before I continue, I should introduce myself. My name is Tim Wilson, and I'm largely involved with kind of curriculum and content development here. Also joined by two of my colleagues today, Peter Lee and Tim Solly, and they'll be manning the Q&A area as we go. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A as opposed to in the chat, which will largely be unmonitored during the webinar. I'm just going to release a quick poll, and apologies if you have attended our other more recent webinars as part of this series. This is just really useful for us to get a better understanding of why you're here today, what your main areas of interest are, and it will just help guide the focus that I take in the webinar as we move on through. All right, I'll leave that poll open just for a little bit. So we're going to start looking at some of the diversity content. So this has been a really exciting project we've been working on for probably roughly 3 years now, looking to certainly expand the content that is available in the programs to include lots of questions and works by women composers of colour, as well as also trying to provide lots of content outside of kind of Western art music, so integrating more pop, jazz, world music type sources. And as part of today, we'll also have a bit of a look at how the programs can also point to external sources now. So, being able to access content on YouTube, Spotify, point to scores on IMSLP gives you a lot more options now for the types of media and content that you can integrate within questions in Auralia and Musition. Okay, I will jump across now to Auralia. I've prepared a few little worksheets just to demonstrate some of the kind of diversity content that is available. For those of you who haven't kind of used the programs before, all these question types are highly customizable. So we provide lots and lots of content, but you can, of course, import your own audio, import your own notation, and design questions and the curriculum content based around that custom media. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'll jump into tasks. So I'm just in Chrome here in the browser. So students using the programs can access all this content, regardless of whether they're using phones, tablets, computers, and so on. All right, so I've got a little custom task here. Let's start with diversity training. I'm going to start at your attempt here. So over on the left here, you can see I've got a little the navigators available there, and I just have a few different entries set up here, labelled with some composer names, just so you can see the works and the composers that we're bringing to this particular worksheet. Let's start with this question. So in this case, we are given the rhythm of this particular melody, and we're just having to transcribe the pitches. And hopefully I've shared my audio, but let's have a listen. Okay, and so on. Let me know if you're having any issues, technical issues, hearing any of that, but I think it should all be coming through loud and clear. I will end the poll now. Thanks for all your replies there. Okay, so as a student, I can enter my answer here. Hopefully do much better than what I've done here, and then get some nice feedback. I can play back the audio again and view the score. Okay, so that's one question type. I might jump to our next question now, which uses an excerpt from the same work. This time around, we have a multiple choice question type. Now you'll notice up here as well, again, if you haven't played with the programs before, we have a worksheet running here, and I have set a limit of 3 replays on this particular question. So the student can only hear it 3 times, and then they have to submit their answer. You can select their answer, and then once again review the notation, play back their audio. All right, next we'll move on to some works by Robert Detz. And these next 3 questions essentially use the same bit of media for playback, but we're delivering different question types with each one of them. I should say for this entire little demo worksheet as well, I have opted to turn on feedback for students. If you had, say, a more formal exam type context, you can, of course, turn off the feedback so students just step through the exam without getting that information as they go. Okay, let's have a listen. Okay, scale degree. I can listen again. Okay. Now, for the next one, this is a more traditional melodic dictation question. Again, using that same excerpt. Of course, if I was doing a formal exam, I wouldn't present the questions like this with the feedback on it. As I mentioned, the feedback from question 1 would give away the answer to question 2 in this case. But just to show you how that works, I wanted to leave it on. Okay, so on, just get some nice feedback here. I can, of course, also click on or select my answer here to play back what I submitted as the student as well. So that's useful for allowing students to compare their answer with the correct answer. Okay, and finally, I think we end up with a harmonic dictation question here, again using the same excerpt. You'll note here that the chord palette is limited, so it's not like a full chromatic chord palette. So that was a choice I made when I set up this particular entry in this worksheet. And I deemed that this particular chord palette was kind of appropriate for students doing this level of content. If you did want to have everything from applied chords to augmented sixth chords, Neapolitans, everything in there, you can, of course, make all of that available as well. Okay, let's have another listen. Okay, there we go. Okay, so next up, I just wanted to illustrate ways that you can use the programs now to access videos, audio content, scores, all sorts of things that are hosted on external sites. So in this particular case, I have a link here to Just the Way You Are by Bruno Mars going to a YouTube clip. So of course, being able to access all this popular content and integrate it within automatically assessed questions within Auralia or Musition is really powerful, giving you just so much more kind of contemporary content that you can integrate. Unfortunately, some of this content is not the sort of thing that we can just include in the library due to kind of copyright and licensing kind of issues. So this is a great way to access that content and still have the automatic assessment side of the programs. So as a student, I can click on this link and it will open up in an extra tab for me.
When I see your face, there's not a thing that I would change, 'cause you're amazing, just the way you are. And when you smile.
Okay, I got a bit ahead of myself with my chord entry there. So you can see here we have provided the rhythm of the melody for the student in this case, as well as a little reference to the lyrics here. And the student simply just has to pop in the chord symbols as they go. And then they kind of get some nice feedback here. They can play back this in notation form, as well as review it back in YouTube as well. So that, of course, was a YouTube link, but you could, of course, point to things, links on Spotify, which perhaps don't have any kind of visual distraction, which may be of use as well. We've seen other instructors also use this same feature, not only for delivering more contemporary content, but even to, within perhaps a worksheet or a course, deliver a training video on something. So their institution may have a training video on a specific topic. So they actually integrate that within the course or worksheet itself. So the first entry might be, here's a link, go off and view this worksheet on chords 1, 4, 5, and 6, and then complete these questions. So it just provides a really nice learning sequence for students. Okay, next up, we're going to have a look at some pop form questions. And again, these are pointing to YouTube clips. In this case, Sherry by the Four Seasons. And this is a form question where the student has to identify what's going on. Okay, and so on. And then for this particular example, we then have a a bit of a form diagram. Expand that a bit for you. So the student can actually step through and see again some reference to the lyrics. The sections are labelled, and there's also some harmonic kind of content there as a reference for people. Okay. All right, so next we have another form-based question. In this particular case, we've kind of flipped the question format a little bit, and we have decided to show the kind of main sections of the form, and then we're going to point to a specific bar and section of the YouTube clip, and the student essentially has to identify what section of the form that is. And we've got a variety of options down here. So the student can either jump straight to this section, they can watch the entire video, or they can jump to sections perhaps just before bar 29, the previous section, to provide some context to the section you're about to hear. So for now, just for this demo, I'll jump straight to bar 29. Okay, and then of course using our chorus. And again, nice form diagram with all of those labels on there as a reference for the student. As well as we provide a bit of information on, kind of key elements and characteristics of a chorus, so the student can start to establish a firm grasp upon that as well. Okay, so finally in this worksheet, excuse me, we'll have a look at a couple of pop harmonic dictation questions. So these are not pointing to any external sources. These are progressions that we have, generated and recorded ourselves, that deal with really specific sets of vocabulary within a pop context. Also, there are some kind of world music examples as well. I think this first one is a reggae example. Okay, and we'll just have a look at the final question here. Okay, and so on. So obviously this pop content is really useful for helping students to hear things within a more contemporary setting. Not only is it other sounds perhaps potentially kind of more familiar to them in perhaps a lot of the different types of music the current music they may be listening to, but it can be also really challenging in different ways, as we know that the texture in a lot of this sort of music can be quite different to what you might hear in a very traditional kind of harmonic dictation type question, where it's all in kind of SATB style and nicely voice led, in that kind of more cut down context. So lots and lots of different possibilities there. I'll jump into the Auralia app really briefly, into the library area. And again, for those of you that haven't explored this, this is not how the students see or experience this content. This area is for instructors to import and create their own custom questions, and also, review all the existing content that's already provided in the software, and there is lots of it. But the search function is really useful, and the main thing I wanted to illustrate here is that we've included a bunch of tags in here for you, so you can easily isolate specific things. So one of these might be to look for diversity content. And so here, by typing this in, you can see we have a bunch of composers and questions that that fit under this category. And so you can easily select something, and maybe we'll go down to this example we actually saw in the worksheet earlier. So all my media and composers, all my media is on the left here, all sorted by composer, and any attached questions you can find on the right here. And you can see this particular work has 12 different questions attached to it. And as the instructor, I can easily click on the little preview button here. And so on. Now, something else that's kind of really useful to know here is that if you are exploring the library, looking for diversity content, and you find something that is kind of really relevant for you, you can double click on the question over here, and there's a tags field. And so you might decide this is super relevant, and I'll just use 101 course code tag. So by tagging it like that, that means you can easily find this question again later if you need to add it to your own worksheets or tests, or perhaps to your own custom syllabus. So it can be just a good way of labeling, tagging things so you can find them easily later, because the library is a huge beast, and it's continuously growing as well. So we are always adding new bits and pieces here as well. One other thing that may be of interest is all this diversity content and media is shared across both Auralia and Musition. So in cases where you may have, say in this particular example I have highlighted here, a harmonic dictation question. In Musition, you may have a matching harmonic analysis question. So it makes it really easy to create aligned content across both of the programs, if you are running aligned year training and theory courses. So lots going on there. We won't dive into the library any further today, but yes, if you are looking to kind of customize content, import your own audio, import existing notation you may have created in, say, Sibelius or Finale, that all happens here, and we have a bunch of other kind of training videos that look at that in great detail, and I'll send you a link for those a bit later. Okay, I'm going to leave this task. And just before we move on, just looking at some of the diversity theory content. Here are a couple of questions which do use some of the same content we just saw in the e-training worksheet. In this case, a harmonic analysis question. And here's an example of where you may be able to find the full kind of chromatic chord palette, and enter all of that in there, and that automatically assessed. But the other question type I wanted to demonstrate here was again where we are using an external source, but in this case it is actually a PDF score. So this can be really useful in cases where you have existing PDF content, or scores that are perhaps quite lengthy, and you want students to be able to look at these and observe a larger form or larger sections of a work. So using external links doesn't only have to go to videos or audio sources. You can go to documents that are perhaps hosted on IMSLP or perhaps on your LMS if you're using, say, Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, etc. So you can access all these sorts of resources from within the system, and then have Auralia and Musition automatically mark it, giving you lots of flexibility. Okay, so that's kind of the quick look at the diversity content. As I said, there's lots and lots in there. And using that diversity tag in the library can be a really useful way to get an idea of exactly what is there. You can also use tags like pop or contemporary music to find good source questions and materials there too. Next, I'd like to have a look at just some of the fundamentals content. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few things that are kind of tucked away in the programs, and for one reason or another, we perhaps haven't exposed them within our complete syllabus or some of our worksheets and things. And some of them may be really useful, especially for kind of this level of student. So music in context, yes, and we'll have a look at some rhythm content and meter content, and then just some different question types that just different directions that you can use to approach teaching pitch, understanding, basically comparing pitches across different clefs, understanding pitches and accidentals within a bar and how they hold over and so on. So let's jump back in here. All right, so we'll jump to our fundamentals worksheet here. Let's start a new attempt. Okay, so again, on the left here in our navigator, I've kind of grouped some of these different question types together in different entries. So first of all, we'll have a look at music in context. Now, I think these questions are really useful because we've created a bunch of melodic content, small excerpts, and then wrapped a whole range of different question types around those. So I think there are roughly, 50 different excerpts in there across a range of levels for students. But they deal with a lot of fundamental content. And let's just step through some of these sorts of things. I guess the key point here is that in this particular entry that I've set up, all the questions will use this one melodic excerpt. So students have to get used to, as the title says, observing, learning about music in context. Okay, so the first thing, we're the longest note in the melody, so looking at duration. You can, of course, with all of the rhythm terminology, if you're in the UK or somewhere else in the world and you are not using crotchets and quavers and things like that, you can, of course, switch to that terminology as well. So here I can go half notes on, and of course I can play it back in Musition as well. Okay, so next up, again, as I said before, using the same excerpt, but this time we're kind of comparing to bar 2 with the other bars in this little excerpt. A pitch question in this case, so the student has to go through, find the highest note in the excerpt, and then make their selection there. And then moving into a few things, essentially, interval identification within context, but in this particular case, it is just a true or false question type. Okay, interval identification again, but just by quantity, not by quality. So the highest and lowest notes in bar 4. D up to the B. Oh, sorry, so the F sharp up to the D. I didn't check the clef. Okay, the melody is in D major, so starting to focus here more on primary triads and having students identify them within context as well. And then moving into some terms and symbols as well, all again within the one excerpt. And finally, identifying the crescendo at the end there and what that actually means. So I hope you kind of find those question types useful. I think it's really, really quite powerful content for students of a certain level, and certainly makes kind of removes that abstract aspect of, like, isolating an interval, or analysing an interval in isolation, or seeing a crescendo on its own, just displayed on screen, as opposed to seeing it in a real context. Okay, a few other question types. We'll move into the rhythm kind of sums area that you just may not be aware of in the programs. So you can, in here, just simply jump in and second bar, just enter a rhythmic value that is the sum of everything in the first bar there. And similar question type here. Moving into rhythmic durations, again, some really fundamental type questions, having the student simply just place the displayed rhythmic values in order from shortest to longest. Now moving into meter transposition, there is actually a topic in the programs now that has all of this content, but it is reasonably new, excuse me. So I just wanted to highlight it. There are a number of different question types for things like this, multiple choice, where students are comparing, give an example with how it may or may not look in a similar meter. So going from 3/4 to 3/2 in this case. And then moving on to some question types where the student actually has to enter a displayed rhythm in the new meter. So these cover meter transposition in this kind of format, but then also moving between, say, compound and simple meters as well. So students can work on all these kind of key skills. Okay, so these are some of the kind of pitch and accidental questions that I mentioned, again, approaching things from a variety of different angles so that students can reinforce these key skills in a whole bunch of different ways. Again, just true and false, but comparing bass clef to treble clef with different accidentals. In this case, adding an accidental to the second note to make it a semitone higher than the first note. And in this case, adding the accidentals to place this melody into the key of A major. So the student can simply add their accidentals as they need to the score there. And then finally, some questions that deal with cancelling accidentals. So here, the student can come in and cancel the accidentals that have occurred earlier in the bar. Okay, so hopefully lots of useful kind of fundamentals focused content there that you can integrate into your curriculum. Again, if you have any trouble finding any of this content, just get in touch. These search functions in the library will help you with a lot of that. And over time, many of these question types will also emerge into our complete syllabus and through some of our kind of theory 1 through 4 syllabi as well. And speaking of that, I might just jump in here really quickly and just show you the kind of practice area for students. So we kind of include our complete syllabus, which includes levels across all the topics in the programs, but we've also mapped levels more specifically to different kind of curriculum needs, from AP music theory, jazz post-tonal content. And then we do have a series of theory and oral 1 through 4 And so when students select these, they receive a kind of topic list and a level structure that is mapped around a 15-week semester. So by coming in here, exploring this content in this way, students can get a really clear idea of the expectation of the sort of areas of the learning areas that we'll have to cover during the semester. Of course, every institution in the world has a different concept of the key content they want to deliver in their theory and oral one kind of sequence. But you can, of course, in Auralia and Musition, mix and match content, reorder it, shuffle it, remove things that aren't relevant for you, and bring in other things as well to match really specific curriculum needs. We won't be exploring that today, but again, we do have other training videos that have a look at that. Okay, so moving on now to a couple of the new features and content that are coming in the programs really soon. For this next area, singing and recording, this is not one of my strong points, but I have got together with a couple of my colleagues and we've recorded a few examples just to show you how this feature works, and then I'll show you some of the question types and content that we're building to support this new feature. Yes, let me bring up the video and I'll show you. I'm warning you in advance of the three of us, there is not a single trained vocalist amongst us, but yes, hopefully this will give you a bit of an idea of how students may approach this.
La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Do, re, mi, re, do, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding of the sorts of question types you can deliver with this new feature. It is essentially a recording tool that you can apply a whole bunch of different parameters to. So you would have heard there were kind of monophonic singing examples, sight singing examples. There were also examples where the student had to sing along with some accompaniment, and in some cases that was like notation-based accompaniment. In other cases, it was a real audio recording, and in other cases, you saw some imitation type questions there where something was played and then the student had to imitate it. So lots of kind of really great ways you can use this feature and also integrate it within a sequence of questions, as preliminary exercises to melodic dictation or things like that. So within a worksheet, you could perhaps have a imitation question where the melody gets played, the student has to be able to sing it back. They sing it, and then that's submitted for the instructor to review, and then the student moves on to a melodic dictation question that uses the same melody. So it just ensures that as the instructor, you're able to make sure that the student is properly hearing and internalizing the melody before they're even trying to notate it. So lots of potential uses there for this particular feature, and I did do a whole webinar on this feature as well, as far as how to create your own questions and all of that sort of thing. So I'll pop that in the link a little bit later in the webinar. One other thing I should mention here that's not particularly relevant, but because it's popped up here at the bottom here, I will mention it. So the programs Auralia Musition can be integrated with your LMS. So if you're using Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, Brightspace, and a bunch of others at your institution, you can link the programs with your LMS. And what that means is students can launch practice and tasks from within your LMS. And when they're doing a task, the results will also then flow back to your LMS gradebook. So it just makes the whole process a lot more integrated, seamless for both instructors and students. Now, as far as content goes, for this new feature, we've been creating lots and lots of different question types, some of which you saw in the demo video. But I'll also just show you some of the things we have going here. So we've just created a few different worksheets, largely focused on sight singing in this particular case. And the worksheets essentially go from stepwise motion for the student, where there is in fact no rhythmic element, it just uses whole notes, then stepwise motion with just quite simple rhythmic values. Excuse me, and then slowly expanding to include skips within the tonic chord, the dominant, and then getting onto some predominants. So I haven't got them all listed here. You can see some of the numbers are missing, but this extends all the way through to chromatic harmony. And not only do you have question types with kind of monophonic sight singing questions, but it also includes some homophonic ones as well, where there's an accompaniment played for the student whilst they are singing. So lots of potential uses for this content, and yes, we're hoping to have that available really soon as part of our version 7 release. So we'll be certainly letting everyone know as soon as that's available. Okay, and the final kind of content area that we're going to look at here is our new 4-part writing feature. This is all automatically graded and is hopefully going to save instructors lots and lots of time, and take a big part of that grading load off your hands. But additionally, also give students hopefully some really useful feedback and immediate feedback in this somewhat challenging learning area. There's lots of content there. I'll show you really quickly just how this And this feature works. 4-part writing demo. Okay, so I've set up a little worksheet here with just a few different question types, and I've kind of pre-done a couple of the questions so that you don't have to watch me entering my answer. But I guess this is an example of what a question may look like. The student simply comes in, enters their notation. We can then switch to voice 2 to enter the other parts. And this particular worksheet has been set up so that the student can check their answer. And in this case, we've set it up so they can check up to 20 times before they actually have to submit it. Again, as for a formal assessment, this is something that you can disable so they get one chance to enter their answer and then submit it. I won't submit this one because it's not going to give us that much useful information, but I will jump to one that I completed earlier that will just illustrate a few of the kind of errors that Musition will pick up. So you can see here I've entered across all my voices, and when I check my answer, I now get some nice notation with some annotations on it to indicate the error types. And over on the right here, you can see I also get a list of each of the errors. Now this is interactive, so it's really easy for me to solo a particular error as well. So by clicking on an item in the list on the right there, I can then solo that on the notation, or I can add additional errors in here as well. So you can see Musition is identifying all sorts of chord spelling and realization issues, along with parallel octaves, and in this case, unresolved seventh, which is also resulted in some unequal fifths there as well. The other useful thing is that students can click on the notation to hear their answer. Okay, so not my finest work, but we can't all be bark. So as I said, for this question type, we've set it up so the student can have multiple attempts at checking their answer before they submit it. So I can then go back, edit my answer, make any additional changes, and then check my answer again. So a really powerful tool that can hopefully save lots and lots of time. I won't spend any more time actually submitting questions for you now, because again, I did do another training video that was purely focused on this new feature. So if that's of interest, you can certainly explore it there. I will say just quickly that the feature does allow you to deliver all sorts of different questions, not only these sorts of questions where there may be nothing given to the student apart from the Roman numerals initially. You can also create questions where the student perhaps only has to enter, say, the inner voices. So if you need to introduce certain key concepts in a really slow or scaffolded way, you can certainly do that within the programs. Now, content-wise, we have created lots and lots of levels here for you. So you can choose to either use these or copy them and edit them, or reshuffle them to kind of suit your pedagogical needs or your particular curriculum sequence. But essentially they start from some kind of preliminary exercises, identifying motion types, understanding kind of range and spacing, and then getting down into the actual writing questions. So here we start off with students just having to write 5-1 resolutions, but in this case, the first chord is actually already given. So the student is only having to enter the second chord there. And then as we move up through the levels, you can see here, the student is then having to enter both chords. And then we slowly start to introduce inversions, seventh chords and variations, and getting to some predominant harmony in this particular syllabus. And of course, the excerpts get slightly longer to facilitate that. And then as you move up into some of our other syllabi, so in theory and oral 2, we start to deal with cadential 6/4s and their resolutions, 6 chord, and then moving right through here to leading tone chords, sequences, and then getting into applied chords as well. So some of the questions might look a bit more like this. And then in the final bit in theory and oral 3 here, we deal with, excuse me, mixture chords and Neapolitan chords and all sorts of other goodies. So all that content will be there ready to use really soon. As I said, it's really easy to grab the bits and pieces that you like or want to use, and push the other bits to the side, or customize content if you want. You can certainly add your own notation with your own progressions to work on really specific things as well. And again, I cover that in kind of detail in a previous webinar. I might actually grab the links for that right now and pop them in the chat for you. So the two previous webinars, on the sight singing and the 4-part writing, you can find at that link that I've just popped in the chat there. And as soon as we're done with this one, we'll be uploading this particular webinar there as well. So if you need to review it or share it with colleagues or anything like that, you can certainly do that there too. Of course, with all the 4-part writing side of things as well, just so you're aware, aside from being able to create your own content, you can also customize all the rule and scoring schemes. So if you want to, remove certain rules or have them, penalized perhaps less than some other kind of errors, then you can certainly control that in the software as well. So that makes aligning with, specific curriculum bodies or aligning with specific textbooks really quite simple. Okay, so at this point, we're getting close to finishing up. I'm just having a quick look in the Q&A. It looks as though most of the questions have been answered. Does anyone else have any questions at this point that I can help out with? I'll keep an eye on that for the next little bit, just in case anything crops up. Before we finish up, I will say for anyone who's attending who isn't currently using the programs and doesn't have a current trial, we can certainly set that up for you so you can have a play with the programs in your own time, actually use it with some students to see how it goes in the real world. I will pop a link for that. Actually, the link that I just sent you, the webinar training link, includes a request a cloud trial button there. So if you're interested, you can do that there. Alternately, I'll just release another poll. Oh, maybe it's not here. The other poll's on here, sorry. So yes, if you'd like to have a play with the programs in your own time, certainly get in touch at the link that I popped in the chat and we can get you set up there. As I mentioned, the webinar recordings will also be available at that link. And finally, if you do have any questions or would like to explore any of these areas any further, please do get in touch. I'll pop these links again into the chat for you. You know, we love to get feedback about the program, about things you'd love to see, about content that you would love to see. It really helps kind of drive the direction we take with certain things and how we kind of prioritize them within our development. We also do have a live Zoom support every Wednesday there at 4:30 Eastern Time, USA, commonly, which is usually hosted by my colleague, Tim Solly. And, you know, that can be a great chance to just drop in if you've got something that's bugging you or something you know you should be able to do with the programs, but you can't quite either remember or figure out how to do it. Drop in there and we'll be able to help you out. Training videos on our YouTube channel, and also our Facebook group may be of interest. So this is kind of a growing group that it's been quite interesting. It's a kind of a closed group that we've opened, that we've created to allow, you know, people to kind of share ideas on how they're using the programs in the real world, discussing best practice, any issues they might be having. So hopefully through the, you know, the kind of the collective wisdom of that group, we can all kind of, you know, grow with the programs. Okay, well that is about it from me. I can't see any other questions in the Q&A there. Really appreciate you joining us today. I know these are kind of busy and crazy times for everyone, but yeah, really appreciate you taking the time out to drop in and join us for this. Please do reach out if you have any questions, but otherwise, take care. I'll leave the Q&A open for a little bit longer, just in case anyone has any issues, and we'll go from there. All right, thanks very much, everyone. See you later.